All right, everybody. Well, hey, we are ready to excited to have our good friend Eric Nevins join us here on Petcha Podcast. Now, Eric is the host of the Halfway There podcast. He's the founder of the Christian Podcasters Association and an all-around great guy, not just good guy, great guy. And if you're headed out to the Spark Christian Podcasters Convention, February 21st and 21st, he's a speaker there as well for us. So we're glad to have our buddy Eric Nevins join us here on Petcha Podcast. How's it going today, man?
Very good. It's great to see you as always, Scott.
Yeah, man. Hey, you look good. You're leaning up a little bit, or maybe just trim the goatee. I don't know. One of the two.
Yeah,
huh?
Maybe I took care of myself. Trim the beard a little bit.
Well, tell everybody a little about Halfway There, about your podcast.
Yeah, Halfway There is a show I started about, it's almost 4 years ago. So
Wow.
In 2016, this time of year, I was kind of suffering through editing my first season of shows. But I really started it really kind of for two reasons. First of all, because I would look at the Christian podcasting landscape and all I would find is sermons. Now that's great. I love that, people who preach have a chance to recycle their stuff through podcasting. But I wasn't really interested, having been a preacher and done some of that, not really where I was. And I wanted things that connected where I was more. And so what I did is I started a show that really focused on the spiritual journey. And so we get people to tell us their stories. And we talk about all kinds of things, from how people find faith to what I like to call the dark night of the soul, or the what's the word? The spiritual desert, sometimes some people call it. So kind of the hard times we experience even after we find faith.
Yeah, man. 4 years doing a great job. You also, a few months back, had your own online Christian Podcasters virtual summit too that went really well for you, didn't you?
We did. Yeah, we did the Christian Podcast Summit, and this was back in June last year. It was a lot of fun. Brought together about, I can't remember, 7 or 8 of us together to kind of share members, some of our expertise, things that we've learned, to talk about that, because it's a little unique being a Christian podcaster if you see yourself as promoting something that spiritual or most of us don't see ourselves as speaking for God, but in some ways, kind of that spiritual kind of stuff. It's important to approach it in a little bit of a different way that most podcasting platforms aren't going to tell you about.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. I think spirituality and religion is one of the biggest segments of podcasting out there too. How are you kind of finding your audience, or kind of separating yourself from the, I don't want to say the noise, let's say the joyful noise of Christian podcasting? How's that sound?
Yeah, I love that. So I think there's a couple ways. So first of all, just doing something different, I think. So having that emphasis on the spiritual journey is unique for sure. Also, I've really enjoyed, you mentioned the Christian Podcasters Association, which is really just a Facebook group that I started a couple years ago to connect Christian podcasters, bringing us all together. I think that's been one of the best things that I do. And it's funny because I just started it because I wanted to connect with a bunch of people, but now I'm kind of a leader in that space. It's been kind of fun.
Well, but I think that's a great way, because especially when you're diving into niches, you don't know if you're experiencing things others have experienced, and the best way to find out, and I think grow, is to network with other people that are either going through the same thing, or have gone through it, or going to go through it, that you can help guide along the way and be kind of a servant leader in some sort of fashion. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely.
What's been the biggest surprise about starting that and kind of leading that tribe, as we like to say?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is I told you that most of the things, I thought most Christian podcasts were sermons, right? Mm-hmm. But it turns out there's a whole bunch of us who have the same idea, who have something we want to podcast about, that, all kinds of different ways. I have a friend who started a podcast. It's the most like Malcolm Gladwell's kind of style of storytelling. It's called Truth's Podcast. My friend Chris Starin found him doing that. Misty Phillip, who's doing her show but she's the founder of Spark that you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
So actually, a bunch of those people like that.
Spoke to her last night. She told me to tell you hello. Actually,
nice. That's awesome. Yeah. I've been working with her closely, which is cool. So, but it's that kind of bringing us together, bringing people together, and meeting people who have the same kind of idea, the same vision, the same heart. Isn't that the cool thing about podcasting? Podcasting. So there's like 800,000 podcasts now. And even though that seems like a lot when you compare it to websites or blogs, it's still super small It's a very tight-knit community, and we all still want to help each other. We don't see each other as competitors. I love that.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a good thing out there. I'm a big believer. That's why we've got so many great people today and through the next weekend, all have different phases or different things that we're doing, all working together to make each other better. Because there's really enough. There's plenty of earballs and eyeballs out there for us to listen to or watch. Right.
That's right.
What is? I know that you've worked on monetizing your show, and we're going to do more of that. What are some ways that you've done that, and tips that you'd like to give some of the people watching out here how to kind of monetize their show?
Yeah. So a couple things. I've tried a lot of different stuff, and some of it's more successful than others. Like everybody, we have merchandise for the show, which I just love to wear a halfway there T-shirt. That's kind of fun. Never thought about that when I started my podcast. We have Patreon, which is pretty cool. People who support, and I do things like an extra conversation for everybody who supports us on Patreon. And you can get one of those free T-shirts if you support us at $25 or above.
There you go.
I try things like the conference that we talked about earlier, and I'm actually working on a membership site for Christian podcasters as well, because I think there's some room there to just, again, bring us all together, but in a maybe more intentional way.
Mm-hmm. I think so as well too. Now, what has been the biggest surprise? And I've asked this of everybody. What's been the biggest surprise with the podcast for you, with your listener base or people reaching out? What's been the thing that's kind of wowed you?
You mean besides the fact that people listen to it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Because I was so unsure. I didn't think anybody would listen to it. Late last year we passed 300,000 downloads, which I still can't believe.
Congrats, man.
So that's pretty awesome. But also just connecting to people. Like the people that I get access to talk to are people that I never would have imagined I'd have a chance to talk to. So I'll give you an example. One of the ways. Short version of the story is there's an author named Os Guinness, and he's from the family you're thinking of, the Guinness family, right? And one of his books is the one that sent me on this podcasting journey. Even though he wasn't talking about podcasting, he was saying we got to change people's character. And I started asking the question, how do you change character? Well, you do it by telling stories. That's why I have a story podcast, not a podcast where I try to tell you what to think.
Right.
And I got to interview him last year. I never would have had access to him without a podcast. And so he came on the show. That was a huge milestone moment for me. And I didn't expect, I would have been fine interviewing people at my church or wherever, but to get a chance to interview people who are huge. The other thing that I really think surprises me is I did not have categories for the kinds of things that God does in people's lives. It's huge. It's way beyond what I ever would have thought. And so I have this slogan. I say, I think the spiritual journey is wider, deeper, and longer than you've been told. And so that's what we try to bring out in the show.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it, because you do have some great stories on the show, and love listening. And everybody's walk is different, and we all have peaks and valleys in our faith. Sometimes it's deep, and sometimes it runs very wide with a variety of different things out there. And you do a great job of interviewing and asking questions. Has there been anything that's kind of you struggled with along the way with your podcast in 4 years?
Engagement is the hardest part, I think. Like trying to get people to, because I know they're listening. I can see that, but how do I get them to talk to me? As things. So I've tried everything. So I've got this great successful Facebook group for Christian podcasters, but then I try to do it for my own podcast, and I don't know, there's just not people in there. So that's been kind of my biggest things, trying to get people connected to the things that I want to offer, and to really know them, because you got to know your audience, right? I want to know what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the biggest thing. We love seeing downloads and love seeing reviews, but can somebody just drop me an email that I can talk to somebody? Right.
And I do get to hear from, every once in a while I get to hear from Australia or, England, or that is pretty cool. I mean, imagine every once in a while I'll be on the charts in Australia, and I'll think, why in the world are Australians listening to me? But they are, and that's cool.
Maybe halfway there is a keyword for they're halfway around the world. Maybe.
I don't know. Who knows? I'd love to go. By the way, if any of you are down in Australia.
Well, we just had Joy Nicholson on from New Zealand. Maybe that's a little further. Yeah,
I'd go there too.
Yeah, right. I think I'd rather go to New Zealand right now than Australia.
Isn't that a cool thing? I don't know about you. You're like big business and you do awesome stuff. So I don't know about you, but I never thought people would invite me places because of my podcast, right? So I'm going to Spark, been a part of New Media Summit, things like that. And that's because of podcasting. It's amazing.
Yeah, that was always surprised. I was actually, it's a funny story. I was in Vegas when I get a text message or a message from Steve asking me to come to New Media Summit where we originally met here in Austin. And he's like, I'm like, what's an icon? I'm like, you want me to what? I'm like, really? And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Sure, why not? And I agree. It's interesting opening doors and having people reach out to have you speak or attend and do everything. So it's pretty exciting. I'm excited to have hear your session in Houston. You want to give those that are listening here that may be headed to that a little insight on what your topic's going to be about?
Yeah. So I am talking about the power of connecting, right? That podcasting is so good for connecting to other people, whether it's other podcasters or people that you want to know and be involved with. But also, I think the way that connects to the future of the church, because I have this big idea. There's a guy named Sky Jatani who has a podcast called The Holy Post, which I think is kind of funny. He does that with Phil Vischer, the guy who started Veggie Tales, just for context. But he wrote a post about how podcasting, like you can get better sermons, right, than what you get at church on a podcast. And so maybe what happens in our services is going to change over the next 100 or 150 years. And I think that's fascinating. So we're going to talk about why that matters to what we do today. The fact that as we push into podcasting and we connect with people and we're building community, that's going to change not just not just your life, right? But it's going to have an impact on the church 100, 200, 300 years from now. Should the Lord tarry, if I can throw that in there. And that's the way, we need to have that kind of big picture view. So my hope is to inspire our friends there to think about their show, not just as a thing they're doing in their basement, but as a ministry, as a service that's going to change the world.
I know you're also working, and you and I have had some conversations too, that you're working with other churches to help them launch their podcasts and do that as well too in your local community there. That's awesome. How's that working out for you? Is it a little push and pull a little bit to get kind of help them change up some stuff?
It is a little bit. The hard thing with podcasting, as you know, is it takes a little bit of work. It takes some time. And so I'm willing to do a lot of that work for people, but they have to be willing to commit to that financially. So you either have to commit to it with time or money.
Yep.
And if you're going to, and probably a little bit of both, really. So finding people who are ready has been a bit more challenging than I kind of hoped, but that's okay. It's kind of part of business.
Good stuff, man. Well, you have, if people are heading to Spark, February 21st and 22nd, if they use the discount code EN20, it knocks 20% off. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome, because I'm about to use it to sign up for my ticket there.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, get a little affiliate split there for you. But what's the best way for people to reach out to you to find out more, to pick or scratch your brain or not pick your nose, because somebody said talk about picking the nose earlier, which is pretty hilarious, but scratching your brain and getting connecting with you? Yeah,
the best thing, so I'll give you two. You can go to my website, ericnevins.com, and hit the contact button and send me an email. I love that. If you're on Facebook, which who isn't at this point, and you're a Christian podcaster and you'd like to join, just search Christian Podcasters Association, jump in. I'm active there all the time. And if you want to ask a question or, just connect with me, that's a good place to do it. Well, Eric, you may be halfway there with your show, but I think you're all the way there as a podcaster, man. Oh, that's so sweet, Scott. Well, hey, man, I look forward to hanging out with you in Houston. And once again, guys and gals, if you're listening to this, watching this, check out Halfway There. Eric does a great job of not only interviewing people on their spiritual journey, but also sharing with his as well, too. And just want you to know, man, always here for you. Yeah, one of the best things about this is it's meeting relationships and becoming friends with people in different areas. And I have to say, podcasting has been a joy having you as a friend and somebody to reach out to, brother. Likewise, absolutely. Whenever I think we ran into each other last in August at Podcast Movement, maybe. Yep. And yep. That was is always a delight to see you. Whenever I see Scott Carson, I'm like, hey, I can't wait to chat with you. So thanks.
Well, Steph says hello as well, too, for you.
All
brother.
right.
Great then. Thanks, Eric.
Bye.
All right. That will